Well,
This week in trading history. I'm supposed to read that. Sorry.
Well, go ahead.
This week in trading history. What do you got for us, Patrick?
All right. Well, it was in January of 1920 when Charles Ponzi started his own company called the Securities Exchange Company to promote his new scheme.
The SEC.
It was called the Securities Exchange Company,
the original SEC.
The original SEC. And so Carlo Pietro Giovanni Tebaldo Ponzi, which is also known. Thank you. Was also known as Charles Ponzi, was born in Italy in 1882. It was when he was 21 in November of 1903 that he arrived in Boston aboard the SS Vancouver.
Come on, really?
Yeah. And,
nice.
And so,
do you think they called him Chuck? Do you think when he got to America they said none of this, Charles? We're going to call you Chuck.
I think so for sure.
Chucky Ponzi.
Yeah, and so he was in an interview. He was he gambled away most of his life savings during the voyage to America, and he landed.
He didn't even make it there without going bankrupt.
He landed in the country with $2.50 of cash in his pocket, but $1 million of hopes and dreams in his head, right? And he quickly learned English, and he spent the next few years doing odd jobs on the East Coast, dishwasher and all sorts of stuff. It was interesting, but ultimately he got fired as a waiter for shortchanging his customers and theft. Should have been the first warning sign.
The first warning sign, yeah.
First warning sign. Now, so then by 1907, after some years of failing to do well in the United States, he moved north of the border to Montreal, where he became an assistant teller at a newly formed Banco Zarossi, a bank, basically an Italian bank to service a lot of Italian migrants arriving in the city. And so think about it. You don't make it in the U.S., come and work in the banking sector in Canada. It just makes sense. Anyway.
That's like our motto. Don't make it in the U.S., come get a job in Canada.
Yeah, absolutely. And so anyway, and eventually he makes it back down to the U.S., and he comes upon a really interesting development, which is that in this post-World War I period, there was this international reply coupon, IRC as they're known. And essentially, he saw a weakness in the system, and he thought he could use it to exploit money. And it's basically postage. Essentially, what it implies is that a correspondence between different countries, you could pay for postage in your home country, and subsequently the postage counts to deliver the postage in the next country at the same price. And so he became the first one to form a arbitrage of noticing that there was a massive mispricing of postage between Italy and the U.S. in the excess of like 400% between the different thing. And he realized that if you buy like these stamps on the one side and sell them on the other, you could profit all of this profit. And well, he took it and ran with it. Nice. He ran with it. So it was in January of 1920 that he started that Securities Exchange Company to promote the scheme. And so in this first month, 18 people invested in his company with a total of $1,800. Like a prudent Ponzi, he promptly paid them the very next month with the money obtained from new set of investors. Where have we heard this before? It's named after him, hence why, like Bernie Madoff and many's, it's a Ponzi scheme, right? And so he obviously set up a large office, and word spread about the investment, and he hired agents and paid them generous commissions for every dollar they brought in. And just in 1 month's time, from February to March 1920, the amount invested risen from 5,000 to 25,000 to 62,000, then 309,000, just kept going. And it went from initially starting with a group of migrants to prestigious investors in the Boston area, all starting to get caught up in it. By May 1920, he made $420,000, which, by the way, let's inflation adjust this. I mean, that's probably what, $5 to $20 million of today's
Oh, I think
dollars.
it's more. No,
probably.
it's more.
Right. So, like, just when we're talking 420,000, people have to recognize this is $1920, right? And so it just kept going to the point that, he in $1920 got it up by June 1920 to like $2.5 million. So he then began depositing the money in the Hanover Trust Bank in Boston. He intentionally went to one of the smaller banks in the hope that once his account got large enough, he could impose his will on the bank, or even make it as the bank's president, and bought a controlling interest in the bank for himself and several of his friends by depositing the money. So essentially, he using his Ponzi scheme suddenly became a banker.
Wow.
And so he by July 1920, he's making millions. People were mortgaging their homes and investing their life savings. A typical story, right? Like that happens in these scenarios. And of course, the same scenario, which is, he basically makes sure that everyone that invests is getting paid by the new investors coming in and rolling that money. And it was to the point that in his heyday, nearly 75% of Boston's police force had invested into the Ponzi scheme.
Whoa. I don't think they would have been like the police force or not. Boston police are not the best people to piss off.
You don't fuck with the Boston police. That's for sure.
For sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And so then by July of 1920, a bunch of articles started coming out about Ponzi's money machine. Clarence Barron, who was a financial journalist for the Dow Jones Industrial Company, which went on to, I do believe Clarence Barron, I think that's the same as the one that started Barron's magazine, but I don't quote me on that. I didn't research that in advance, but started to observe the fantastic returns, and himself started to observe that, well, isn't it weird that Charles Ponzi himself was not investing in his own company? Red flag. Red flag, right? And so nonetheless, he then did calculations based upon this postal scheme, and suggesting that in order at this size and magnitude that Ponzi's built a company, that there should be like 160 million of these postal reply coupons, these ICRs or whatever, in circulation, yet only 27,000 of them actually were circulating. In other words, the Ponzi scheme outgrew the actual amount of these the postage things that were out there.
It
right?
sounds just like Bernie Madoff, how that one guy, Markable, I can't remember the guy's name, but he figured out that there was enough open interest in the contracts he
options
claimed to trade. Yeah,
exactly, right. And so when it all unraveled, it brought down 5 other banks in addition to Hanover Trust. And so the investors were practically wiped out, receiving less than 30 cents on the dollar. Ponzi, as investors, everything got destroyed. There was like over $20 million of loss, maybe a couple $100 million in today's dollars or more. A lot of people do compare that to Bernie Madoff's similar scheme in terms of the size and magnitude of that. Obviously, he spent his life in jail, and the scheme did a lot of damage back then. And it's interesting though, he at least gets to claim a Ponzi scheme is named after him, because it's not going to be called the Madoff scheme anymore. It's still going to be called a Ponzi scheme. He was the first. And so it's interesting and that's your little This Week in History.
Well, that's a great story, Patrick. I had a couple of thoughts. First of all, I was wondering if when he got caught, if he would have escaped and come up to Canada. But if he did come up to Canada, he wouldn't go to Montreal. He would obviously go to Vancouver, where he fit right at home. And second of all, I was looking at it, and I don't know if you did this Rain Man kind of impersonation like on purpose or if you read this, but I did put in $420,000 and $1920 comes out to $5.368 million. So you're pretty well bang on correct.
Oh, there you go. There you go. And that's assuming that you believe the inflation numbers you're inputting there. But anyway, that's a whole different that's a whole different story. Anyway.